Hello and welcome to day one of Tech for Humanity Summit, GatherVerse North America. And I'm happy to be here with another roundtable discussion. And I'm very excited for this one because on this roundtable discussion, we're going to be talking about ways of building innovation that serves everyone. So completely agree with that 110%. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick introduction from each of ourselves. We'll start with Luaskia, is that correct? I just want to make sure.
It's Luaska.
Luaska, thank you very much. So we'll start with Luaska, Ian, Mailu, Cedric, and Sheila. So Luaska, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Luaska Nonan. I am the CEO and founder of Equity Principal Consulting. I am a workplace consultant and an AI GP professional.
Thank you for joining us, Luaska, and I love the very straight to the point, sharp introduction. Straight, awesome. Ian, please introduce yourself and welcome back. Good to see you again.
Hello, this is Ian. It's the founder of Howler Hybrid Online Live. I've been trying to use AI for my education model, and my students have been relying on AI and me, but they are not the one who always use AI. I'm the one, and then they must use their brain through my guidance. And then many students and their parents don't know how to utilize AI for their education. So myself and my co-workers are the ones who are trying to help them with their the full utilization of AI. So today I'm very excited to be part of this again.
Ian, pleasure having you with us, and thank you very much. Mailu, we were going to head over to you next before the order got disturbed, so please introduce yourself.
Amazing. Thank you, Russell. My name is Mai. My first name is Mai. Lou is my last name. And I serve as the Chief Impact Officer and one of the co-founders of LifeSpark Labs. We are a video game platform that helps you figure out your career path and builds the skills that employers are looking for. And that's driven by my background as an organizational psychologist. I've been in the work for about 16 years, personally coached over 500 people in my life. I'm an HR executive. And through all those experiences, I've been able to impact over 16 million people through the innovations that I've been building over the last 16 years. And so I'm really excited to share about how we can build tech that is serving everybody and not just for a select few. So excited for this badass panel and badass conversation.
And badass you too. Thank you for joining us, Mai. Cedric, over to you. Please introduce yourself and welcome to GatherVerse.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Cedric Scott Jr. First and foremost, I'm a very proud husband and father, and I work in the education space, cross sections of education technology. I'm the creator of an initiative called STEM 1000 under the umbrella of I Am the Algorithm. So really supporting our youth, thinking about their access in terms of STEM experiences and resources, and also an author aligned to, of course, I have them here, 2 primary books, which also infuse technology as far as AI and different implementation, looking into the future of work and workforce development.
Thank you for joining us, Cedric, and also thank you for what you do as well in terms of teaching the youth and the kids. And last but not least, Carlos has joined us. So welcome, Carlos. Please introduce yourself and welcome to GatherVerse.
Thank you. I'm Carlos Gladden, CEO and founder of 360 Breeze Group. We're a business process management firm in the domain technology and instruction systems. So we kind of focus on a process of how you use certain tools and systems. So we maintain value, even sustainability-wise. And I've been in business for probably more than 10 years. Business process management about 4 years primarily in the system side of even looking at AI and every part of the system behind the system, so we understand the requirements, the tools needed, and what we need to do to make it happen, and actually put the proper steps in place to maintain the value of what we use directly. And so, like I said, we had different resources like different guides, tools that business can use, even AI, certain things like that to help them actually make sure they can actually navigate more properly, and and actually save money at the same time instead of spending so much.
Well, Carlos, thank you for joining us today. And sorry, I forgot about the amazing Sheila. So Sheila, please introduce yourself and welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sheila Fasil. My pronouns are she, her. For those who are visually impaired, I'm wearing a blue blazer, orange hoops, and I have locks and brown skin. I am the founder of Listen First. We are a voice-first multilingual platform that talks to people about their healthcare experience and then use AI and human experts to turn that into insights to drive product patient fit. My background is in healthcare as an innovation specialist, strategist, and operator, and I now work as a social change futurist.
Incredible, and I appreciate you joining us, Sheila. And I'll quickly introduce myself. My name's Russell. I am the Director of Partnerships at GatherVerse. I'm also the co-founder of Just Verify, and we're building the trust layer infrastructure for AI. And our mission is to verify the integrity and trustworthiness of AI models to ensure their responsible adoption across the world and across all industries too. And our vision is to create a future in which everyone can trust AI. So that is it for all the introductions. Now let's get straight into the roundtable discussions, because I'm not going to lie, this was actually one of my favorite things I was looking forward to today. So question one, what does it mean to design accessible innovation that truly serves everyone? Now, we're not going to go in no particular order because I like to mix things up a bit. So Mai, will head over to you, and we'll go over to Ian as well after. So Mai and Ian will head over to you on this question. So Mai, please kick us off.
Amazing. Thanks, Russell. Keeping us all on our toes.
Yes.
So I would say that the question around making it, what does it mean to be design accessible innovation and making it serve everyone? It includes thinking about it from the very beginning of the inception of the product. And you think about who your ideal personas are, who are the types of individuals that you're designing for, and what are their needs, what do they say, what do they what do they want, and how does their lived experience look like from the things around that they hold in their hand physically, when the things that they see on the day-to-day, and the access that they have to information and the access they have to technology. All of that taken into consideration about how they access your product, how they use your product, how they get outcomes from your product, and thinking about that from the very, very beginning, not as an addendum after the fact or retrofitting that. Because that is felt by your users and felt by your consumers, because if it doesn't feel integrated into the experience, that's going to be something that's reflected in the customer retention or lack thereof. So examples of that includes when you think about who your ideal customer persona is. You have to start with a small population to get started, so we can't boil the ocean. Think about in your product roadmap, when will you then intentionally include larger scopes of work? When will you actually include the bigger population beyond that initial customer persona, that ideal customer persona, and being intentional about that growth strategy and your product roadmap? Because if you don't think about that intentionally, it, like I said earlier, becomes an after the fact experience, and that's reflected in your product. So thinking about that with the end in mind, if the goal at the end is to have this be an inclusive product and something that is better for humanity, that's the end goal. Working with that with the end in mind, and taking those small initial steps to get to that end goal is really critical from your strategy all the way through your execution, because it's easy to lose sight of that, because we get pulled in so many different directions of, well, this will monetize better, well, this will do this better, and this group wants this or this. So how to navigate all that feedback and be intentional about it and thoughtful about it is really, really what it means when what that question means to me, Russell.
No, I completely agree. UX UI is fundamental to the user experience, but I will also chuck into that. I think having accessibility when it comes to open source models and AI, when we're talking about small language models as well, and also large language models, I think we should be able to have access to both of them when it comes to open source. And also, I think you should also have personalized, or personal device, sort of AI on your phone directly, as well as, well, obviously not connected to the cloud, but you can have your own personal ones, but also large language models that are also connected to the cloud, right? So I think you should be able to have both, and having both of those accessible and both of that open source, I think that'll be really important as well, because having accessibility when it comes to AI is also just as fundamental as what you're talking about when it comes to the UX UI side, and making sure that we lower the barrier for that for people to be onboarded when it comes to AI. So 100% agree with what you're saying, Mai, and thank you for sharing that with us today.
Sure.
Ian, please tell us your thoughts on what does it mean to design accessible innovation that truly serves everyone?
Okay, I would like to talk about this the perspective of an educator. In the digital world, in this AI era, there are many different types of innovative educational tools, but in many senses that doesn't mean anything because many people don't know about it. They don't know how to use it. So I think designing accessible innovation that truly serves everyone means this innovation should be provided with a proper marketing tool or marketing method. The students and parents and the educators must be well aware of these innovations. So without being fully aware of these technologies, like that doesn't mean anything. Like the fact that technologies exist doesn't mean anything at all. So actually, that's what I'm struggling actually at the moment. I think I have developed a very efficient hyper-learning education model, but many people are not well aware of the value, and they don't trust it because they have never tried that before. So it is really, really hard for me to persuade them, and even it takes so long, and it takes a lot of effort in attracting customers like parents and students. So I think so like a marketing, like sort of like a buzz or viral effect should be entailed with the accessible innovation that truly serves everyone. That's the most important part, I think, in terms of education.
No, I agree. Like we need to have like lower the barrier to entry when it comes to educational side, and being able to have people on board. Because when they say use ChatGPT, someone who knows nothing about it, they're like, well, how do I use ChatGPT? Like, what exactly do I put in there? Do I put a question in there like Google, or like do I put a sentence in there in a certain way? And so I completely agree with what you're saying, Ian. And Carlos, let's bring you into this conversation as well, because obviously we've discussed a couple of points here, UX, UI. Obviously, Ian saying about the education side. What are your thoughts from your perspective when it comes to the 360 degrees group angle, for example?
My approach is first, it's the human side of the technology. So it's how we use technology. Most times in the tech space, we always build systems without the human actual information, right? Somebody comes, they see something, they have a new idea, they put it out there, and then it doesn't go well because you never got the human input. You never got the actual human input. And so I believe that when we design systems and accessible innovation for everybody else, we first had to take the people approach, ask people questions and answer and get actual people data. To me, like even AI, we look at AI and say AI is a smart machine. But if you look at the brain itself, of the human body itself, it's over trillions of power of neurons and so much electricity going through the body, that brain and parts of the body, that's more powerful than the AI by itself. And so we have to look at the human aspect of what the needs are, what the growth are, what the potentials are, why they need it, why they want to use it. And I think it's important that we found out why people need certain things and why they use it before we start building it, and then build a model around them to bring the value. And I believe that's what we need to do is look at the human component first, and then add the process to it and build it for them. Then see how they like it and make their life easier. But sometimes we build technology thinking we build it based on our own ideology, not realizing that if you're going to use it, that's fine. But if somebody else is going to use it, build it towards who's going to use it directly and not you. And that's me keeping the human aspect always on the forefront of all technology systems and AI and design directly, so we understand why we're building it. And then from there, I believe that's what will help us constantly build accessibility of innovation.
100% agree with you, Carlos. Always has to align with human values. 110% agree with that. And also, I think it comes down to trust as well. People being able to trust that this AI is aligned with human values before they even use it. So let's go on to the next question now, though, which is, can innovation be inclusive without rethinking who innovates and funds it? So we'll go to Sheila, and then we'll go to Liaska. So no, please. Sorry. Sheila, over to you.
Sure. I was actually hoping not to get this question, but
Okay.
the only reason is, we have a lot of conversations around, and I'm in the healthcare space, around like who's at the table and who's innovating, and representation being very important. I do think that we are at a point in history where we're beyond the place where representation alone is going to fix the problem. Because what often happens is even individuals of different identities and cultures, when we come to the table, we're following the same playbook. So we're still not ending up with true innovation and accessibility because people are not showing up as their full selves, or they're competing for visibility or resources. So we're following the playbook, right? So I think what we need now is less about thinking about inclusion and just in terms of who's in the table, but building and power into the systems of innovation. And I think in the age of AI, what that really means is, how do we think about data? Data is the new oil. We know that, right? That's what feeds AI, trains AI, gives it direction and objective and a soul, so to speak, right?
100%.
So we've amassed lots of publicly available data. Once that runs out, which we're probably already there, people's data is going to become the new product. So I think we're really at a stage where we really need to be talking about data sovereignty, right? Where people are able to retain ownership of their data as if it's their pinky, right? And are compensated for it, consent for it, and have full visibility into how their data is being used. And if we're going to think about inclusivity, particularly in the data space, I think we need to start by talking about making sure that we're making room for the most vulnerable. And sometimes when we talk about the space of diversity and inclusion, we're talking about a specific race of people, but sometimes the most vulnerable person shows up as a child, right? Or someone with a specific condition. It's not always in these buckets that we're used to classifying people. So we have to come with new definitions of how we think about inclusivity in this space.
That's like, yeah, that is mind blowing, I must admit. And I think it's important to do that 100%. You should be, I saw a study recently saying about in healthcare, particularly Sheila, and it was saying about basically how when it comes to women's healthcare, because AI has been trained so much on the men's health side of things, women's health side of things when it comes to the healthcare is really lacking, right? And I saw that study and I read it and I was like, that's just crazy, like how it's just how it's been trained when it's, like you're saying about the data and everything. So I completely agree with you. We have to not necessarily retrain, but add more into there to be able to have it learn the women's side of things so that it is very neutral, right? So it can do both side things, both men and women, when it comes to healthcare, for example. So I just thought that was a very interesting study and read that I read. And I just thought it was very relevant to what you're saying. So so let's go on to
Luaskin. We're going to go on to
Luaskin.
Okay, so answering that question, there's no way that we can truly innovate if we're intending to do so with a vision for inclusivity. There's no way to do it without really rethinking of who the innovators are and who's funding it, especially if those are the decision makers that are going to be creating these tools and considering the use cases and considering who's considered as part of the individuals that are going to be benefiting from these tools or who may be utilizing these tools. You have to have a way in which to initiate the process from a perspective of, well, if inclusion is the goal, to many of the things that people have said, you've got to take a step back, be intentional, and really understand, well, how do we achieve this goal? If those that are funding these initiatives are going to be the decision makers and are not intending to have an inclusive perspective, then you're never going to get to true innovation, right?
100%.
We've seen a lot of innovative tools, and we've all experienced innovation in our lifetime, but we've also seen the ways in which those innovative tools have just replicated inequitable systems, right? That's all that we've got. To the point that you just mentioned, Russell, regarding the AI systems that have been utilized in the health space, trained on data and modeling on primarily male human anatomy and healthcare, and not that of women.
100%.
That's perpetuating an inequitable system, right? And so I challenge the thought that is true innovation when you are missing large swaths of people and identity groups.
100% agree, and thank you, Loaskan, for that. There we go. See, double thumbs. At least I got it right once in 5. You know, that's not too bad. I'll take it. Cedric, what is your thoughts on this? Can innovation be inclusive without rethinking who innovates and funds it?
No, I'd be in agreement in saying that. No, not necessarily. And thinking, I think something that Sheila mentioned was more so thinking about the most vulnerable, right? And Luaska mentioned like the really thinking about equity, and we can point to cases in history and in time where we've seen, equity happen like almost on accident. So one thing I want to shout out and highlight was actually brought to my attention by a good friend of mine by the name of Tiffany Martin, who happens to be blind and is a Black woman, runs a company called Visiotech, and pointed out to me the curb cut effect. And I'd never necessarily heard the topic or subject matter. And it basically just talks about how we all use the curb cut, right? We all use that. But the reasoning behind it was, of course, for accessibility, right? I don't necessarily use that, but I benefit from it, as does a mother or a father, right? Shout outs to me, pushing a stroller, right, with their young child in it, or the elderly. So again, thinking about instances where we can already point to things that have already occurred in time and space and say, okay, that happened, right? And it supports far more people than it was maybe intended to. So how do you reverse engineer that with intentionality to say, okay, well, how do we replicate the curb cut effect for other things? And then the last thing I would like to really, I think, cast out too is the acknowledgement that innovation and I think invention often become kind of interchanged in people's verbiage and language, especially when it comes to technology. And again, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be something completely brand new, this rocket ship that is going to take us to wherever. It can be really practical things like a slope in the curb that could really ultimately support and help a lot of people. But thinking about implementation wise for us, of course, for me in education, et cetera, but also really broader scale and spectrum in technology, which I think, again, back to one of Sheila's points, goes into thinking, well, how are we being respectful and responsible with things like data?
100%. And actually, talking about data, I've just got a quick comment here. Captain Walker says data is the new oil for sure, Sheila. So she 100% agrees what you're saying. And, Cedric, you bring up some good points there, because even Maya and Ian were saying about when it comes to the UX UI side, when it comes to the educational aspects, when it comes to accessibility side, that also plays into the part of what you're talking about as well. So I think that's very insightful what you're sharing there, Cedric. So let's go on to the next question now, which is inclusivity and accessibility, so this is what it was talking about before, a moral obligation or a key metric for innovation and success? So I think this is very insightful, and that may be potentially a key metric that could be measured. But what do you think on this subject matter? Do you believe that this is correct, or is it just a moral obligation, or is it a key metric? Like, what is it?
I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think that the way to innovate successfully is to be inclusive and accessible. And so I think oftentimes there's this binary, this polarization that's brought up for, it grabs attention, it gets you emotional, it gets you in a defensive positioning. But I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. They belong together. And so being able to be have your product be used by more people than you thought, I'm not sure why that would be a bad thing. So I'm curious why you would not want to have more people accessing and using your products or your services, whether you're education, whether you have a technology, whether you provide a if it's a consumer good. So they're definitely one and the same. And so I think for me, the time frame is maybe perhaps the when, or when does that make sense for the life of your company? Because the other aspect of this is, in a lot of ways, we're talking about concepts of power, like who has the power in making these decisions and who has the power of when these decisions are made. And so if it's one of those things where it's on the strategic vision for the company, but never gets actually executed, there is a dissonance between what you're saying on public, what you're saying in the marketing, like Ian mentioned before, versus what you're actually putting into the experience of the product or the consumer good or the service. So
Right.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. They're one and the same. And I think that sometimes we might unintentionally think of them as different things from each other.
No, I 100% agree that I think they're intertwined. They should definitely be measured, but I think there's also potentially missing key metrics that we're not looking at, right? As well. So, for example, trust would be one from my point of view, right? Then you might say, well, how do you measure trust? Well, trust is a multitude of different aspects that go into that, from ethics to human values to even accessibility. All these different areas kind of really add up to really sort of trust, to say this is trustworthy, right? So this is why I would trust it. And I think that's kind of like one metric we maybe are missing, but also another metric we could potentially be missing is even standards and benchmarks that haven't even been created yet. We look at all these different benchmarks and standards, and we're like, okay, so on this benchmark and do this. Okay, great. It's very technical, it's very mathy. But what about me using it on an everyday basis? Or what about me using this within my specific workflow and that I want to do this? Can you measure that, for example? Can you have a benchmark for that? And I think there's a lot of benchmarks and standards out there that haven't been created yet that I think we still need to create and still need to bring up. Especially when it comes to like women's health, for example. There should be key metrics and stuff in that's created. So there's a lot there, but the point of what I'm getting at is there's a lot of metrics still missing, and I still think there's more that need to be done. I don't know what your thoughts are on but
I totally agree with that, Russell. 100%.
Okay.
It makes me think about when there's a wonderful podcast that focused on the CEO of Pinterest. And he was speaking with Adam Grant, who's an organizational psychologist, who's kind of like my Oprah. Like I would Daniel so bad. But Adam Grant is a wonderful organizational psychologist. And in this conversation with the CEO of Pinterest, we know that there's evidence that shows the harm that comes from using social media, especially for young people, in their brain development, in their ability to handle the cognitive dissonance, in their ability to have the delayed gratification. And so there actually is something physically happening to young people's brains when they use social media. And so it's not an evidence of like, oh, it's not harmful. It is. And so one of Pinterest's goals is not necessarily the number of time or the amount of time you spend on the screen. It's actually the quality of time spent. And so the new trust in social media is similar to like if you think about with cars. When you had, we first made cars, like seatbelts were taboo one day. That was like, oh my gosh, you can't have seatbelts. That's horrible for the driving experience. You would never have seatbelts, which sounds just like completely absurd today because seatbelts are.
It is, it's fundamental.
Compete on how their safety records are. And what if that was the same for social media? If there were the same kind of standards for safety for social media, standards of safety for AI adoption, and we competed on how safe we were, similar to the automotive industry, that future already exists. And so using that type of industrial revolution to how cars and vehicle safety really guides how people and consumers make decisions is not too far of an analogy from the technology perspective, because will we really tolerate putting a dangerous object in our young people's hands for much longer?
I agree.
I
agree, and I'm just panelists and audience, who are watching this. Of course, we do go off questions sometimes, so obviously there will be other questions that will be fired. Just FYI, so there won't be just all the questions that we have here. Sometimes we get questions from the audience. Sometimes that'll be my questions where I just mix things up. So just to make everyone aware of that. And Mai, thank you very much. Like I completely agree with what you're saying there. And Ian, a lot was discussed there. Please do share your thoughts and opinions of either this question or even just what was discussed between myself and Mai, for example?
All right. I think inclusivity and accessibility could be a moral obligation and a key metric for innovation success at the same time as well. I mean, in this globalized world, the businesses, without thinking about inclusivity and accessibility, can never succeed. Like even the private companies operate their business based on their own mission and vision. And their mission and vision should be aligned with the global mission and vision, which is like the perspective of the parent, like God, that embraces all humankind. So, like if they want to succeed in their business, they must think about it. So, inclusivity and accessibility mean also economy of scale. So, which means they can cover as many as customers or clients. So I think, moral obligation and key metrics for innovation success. I mean, I think it goes together. I think it's just like what Milo said.
Yeah, so that's what we were just saying. Myself and Mai, we were just saying that, like, absolutely, they go together, and they're both fundamental, and they're both, a part of foundation, so to speak, in order for success, so to speak. So they technically both have to be measured. Whether you measure them separately or intertwined, that's another question. But we'll do agree with you, Ian, that both of them are fundamental. So, Carlos, we're going to go over to you now, and then Sheila will head over to you after. I've got a different question for you, Carlos. How do we balance the speed of technological advances with the slower pace of constrained adoption? So, Carlos, this is a very interesting question because obviously you're just talking about your clients and stuff. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Interesting question. I think it's hard to balance out because there's no process to balance out. I think when it comes to the process, how we do things, how we focus on, and what process we put in place, we balance things out by putting a process to balance out. And many times, if I build a system with no balancing or no processes in place, and I just say, this is what I want you to do, or I build a system to focus on a certain group of people, and then then there's a focus on these people, there's some balancing to it. So I believe that the process and what we put in place, what balances out the system itself and the technology advancing, meaning that we're constantly advancing slow and fast. We're advancing in some process, even in small business, right? They talk about AI adoption and technology adoption in the corporate space. But in the small business community, they don't adopt the same way. There's more of a slower progression in adopting technology, AI and things like that. And we have to look at why do they adopt slowly? Because they're scared, concerned, they don't know much. Where now we're hearing about the speed of technological in America industry-wise, but that's corporate America. That's the corporate structure of our society. That's not the actual small business society. And so when you start looking at that aspect, they're putting billions of dollars to this infrastructure, thinking everybody's going to use it. And then nobody uses it, and what happens in the value? It goes down because you didn't put in perspective that one side of the grid does not use it. So I'm a firm believer in understanding that the process put in place, the rules and regulations, the code and the procedures, the programming, because it's all machine learning programming, what we put in place is what's going to balance out the process and place those constraints of adoption, meaning that if I teach a person one tool, then you create 10, and then you end up creating 10 new tools outside of one. What happens is before we can even get everybody using one tool like ChatGPT, now you create the next generative AIs again, just so everybody use, right? And what happens is, it's like we haven't adopted ChatGPT yet in the full society yet. So, and everybody's creating these new tools, and then you got to check security, you got to do the other infrastructure piece, you got to check the requirements, make sure everybody understands it. And most times, again, we build just for people to use. We don't build to educate, understand, and implement so people understand how to use it so we can increase shit. So I'm a firm believer in create a process that balances out the speed directly. It's all processes in place. And that's what and that's one thing we actually do miss is the processes in place to make it, to balance out the speed, advancing, and also adoption. Meaning you can merge them together and actually move at a medium space if you use different strategies and techniques. But if you don't use that technique, you'll always have that issue. And I think that from a corporate America standpoint, from investors and everything, it's all about the profit. It's all about the profit. So they don't usually adopt these techniques because they want to use it. They want to build it, get it built quickly without safeguarding the processes. Where in a smaller scale, you can integrate quicker. But sometimes it's slower because you don't got the money, but you don't really need money to create these processes for everybody to use it. It's all about the strategy and process to balance it out.
No, I agree with you, Carlos. And also, I will add this, technology is just advancing so fast. Like, I mean, when we're talking about technological, I mean, we're talking about a broad, spectrum here from, even the last panel that we was having, on XR, AR, VR, etc., all the way to even like Web3 technology, like crypto, etc. And then we're also talking about AI also at the same time. So the speed of technology, especially when it comes to AI, I mean, AI is just advancing so fast that no one can keep up with it. Same with Web3, same with all these different areas. So it's like, at what point, like, I don't think we can slow the pace, like the bottom line of that. But how can we at least get more people to adopt AI? I definitely think lowering the barrier to entry would be extremely important to that. What are your thoughts on that, Carlos?
So my approach would be to educate, right? We all learn every day. It's interesting enough, we have about 5-6 senses that we utilize daily. Walk, movement, taste, tongue, smell, right? And we think those are the senses. But they're not the senses, those are learning tools. We learn through information, through hearing also. And we also learn through seeing, visual scenes. Like every day we receive trillions of microscopic pixels of information we see daily through our brains daily, through our eyes alone. And we don't ever notice the difference. And I'm a firm believer in education. Educate people on different processes based on industry standards on how to use it. And I'm a firm that once you start educating people and then they understand it better, because not everybody learns at the same pace. Some people learn slower, some people learn faster, some people don't need you to learn, they're self-learners. And it's key to understanding who we're educating to have them move fast enough to adoption of these tools. Like, think about it. You just mentioned AI, Web3, right? What do they all use right now? That part of servers, right? The servers. And
sorry,
they all use Web3, AI, all these systems, they all use servers. They use dedicated servers. They use physical servers to power them, right? And believe it or not, they may be advancing, but guess what's not advancing? Our server infrastructure. That's why they're trying to build data centers now of AI data centers to empower it, because there's an issue where capacity, because our original infrastructure is only made to handle websites and phone services, different. It's not made for AI. And so now they're trying to build data centers to power the AI. So those are advancing, but our infrastructure is not advancing currently. It's moving slower because of the amount of power it takes. So in reality, if we're going to look at adoption, and if we're going to look at adoption, constraint, and speed of it all, educate people on different levels. Find out what they know. Find out how they learn. If you know how a person learns, then you can educate them. But if you know how they learn, and you group 100 people in one boat, and you don't ever do a survey and ask real questions and answers about what they're doing, how they learn, what they're doing, how they learn, how they see information, then guess what happens? Then you do a class and nobody gets it. But guess what? If you do a survey and you break it down, you can split those groups up in different levels. So there's immediate, there's information they can learn on the beginning level, there's advanced levels. Those who learn advanced level, you give them advanced training. But those who it's immediate, you give them the basic training, the basic information they need. Because some are not going to get it so quickly. So I think that for speedy adoption, it's all about education, learning, understanding how they learn so you can teach better. And that's what I think we're currently at, is education of the systems and technology and AI, not just usership. Usership is
sure. I'll jump in because Carlos, I think you bring out some very good points there, and I first of all, thank you for sharing, Carlos, and appreciate you giving us your thoughts. But second of all, AI education is important. I definitely think education across the board is important. I think accessibility of what we've just been speaking about before, that's important. I think human values is important. And also, when it comes to adoption, I also think, trust is also important too, as a fundamental part to that. So I think it's a multi-layered answer to the question. And of course, I completely agree with you. Fundamentally, if we don't have the right infrastructure in place, technically we can't have the most AI, and not everyone can use AI, and there'll be limitations on that. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, Carlos. We'll head over to you, Sheila. Sheila, what are your thoughts on, everything that we just discussed, and and also the question as well.
Yeah, so I can address the prior question in this one. I do believe that innovation in an inclusive way is actually key to our survival. I think we talk about it like it's an optional thing, as if humans can't go extinct, right? Like dinosaurs existed, several species of dinosaurs existed, they're no longer here. We are one strand of species of human that exists on this planet. We really think that we can just keep operating the way we do, and we're just going to continue to exist. Every innovation, ultimately, from fire to the original wheel, was made to do two things: extend our lives or improve our quality of life, right? If we no longer know how to do that, we're going to end our species, right? Because the biggest constraint we have is the planet that we're on. The systems that we need to protect as air, water, fire, right? Our communities and ability to breathe and create life, right? So I don't mean to make this existential, but I think sometimes when we talk about innovation and technology, we're thinking in the microcosm of our own lifetime rather than the entire human evolutionary experience. And another point that I want to make on this is we have to be able to learn from the lessons of the past. Every human age that has transpired, we've seen the same issues repeated over and over again. In colonialism, we exploited human bodies, right? In the industrial age, we exploited human labor and the land. In the information age, we exploited our attention, right, to create this data. Now we're in the age of AI. Are we going to continue to allow ourselves to be complicit in creating systems that are devastating our planet? These AI data centers that Carlos talked about, they consume huge amounts of water, something that humans cannot live without for 3 days. So if we're not going to learn the lessons from the past, we're just going to accelerate our own extinction.
That you do have a very good point there, Sheila, and like we can even go in, dive into when it comes to energy consumption, because right now it's not automatically renewable, and then we need these big massive energy centers so that we can then power all that, and then we use nuclear power for that. We can go on and on and on, and I think I completely agree with you, Sheila. Is at what point do we say, okay, well, adoption needs to catch up with what we've built and what we've done, right? We've built these data centers, we've built all this power, we've built all this stuff, right? Now we need to let people catch up or adopt or be onboarded, so to speak, so that they can get up to speed with what's been built so far. So I completely agree with you, Sheila, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. And also, Carlos, thank you for sharing your thoughts too. Now let's move on to the next question, which is, how can storytelling become a tool to make innovation more accessible across cultures and languages? Now, this is kind of a bit dear to me because, when we're talking about trust, right, we think about, it has different meanings for different cultures. Some people it's to, trust a certain thing. Other people, it could be just the confidence in something, right, or the belief in something, right? There's different forms of trust. So how can storytelling become a tool to make innovation more accessible across cultures and languages? So we'll go to Loaskan, and then we'll head over to Cedric after. So kick us off, please.
Yeah, so I've got to piggyback a little bit on Sheila's thought. This was a question I did not want because
oh God, why I gave Sheila the wrong one, I gave you the wrong one. This is all the best, isn't it?
So here's
terrible
on that. I mean, you touched upon it earlier. When you talk about storytelling and you talk about the ways in which storytelling is intended to leverage innovation in a more accessible space, cultures have different experiences with technology. And right now, in order to tell a story about an experience that one would hope would advance the conversation about innovation and creating more accessibility, everyone has to have, that you're talking to, has to have a shared experience or an appreciation about the experience you're talking about in the story that you're telling. And so I struggled with this question because I am really concerned at a higher level of the algorithmic divide that's being currently experienced in many spaces where there are folks that do not have access to this technology. And so their appreciation about the ways in which this technology is intended to advance their lives and be able to be more relatable is not even real to them. And so when you think about the algorithmic divide, as well as like the digital divide, there's still people, communities that are still left behind from the digital divide. So even if you were to attempt to equate AI as a technology to one's experience with internet, as an example, there's still some groups that can't even relate to that. And so I am challenged by this question, and for that reason, yeah, that.
No, honestly, Laskin, like there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's just your personal opinion and what you think, right? And you know, from like, I guess you could speak from like your point of view. Like for example, from my point of view, when I think about storytelling, you know, becoming a tool to make innovation more successful across culture and languages, is what like. It's very interesting actually, because the thing is, when you're storytelling and you're talking about something and you tell the story to someone, because it's different in every single culture and it's also different in every language, it doesn't necessarily correlate that same story to that same culture and language to another continent or another country or destination. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And when it comes to cultures and languages, you know, by the way, I'm in Britain. I'm in the UK. You know, I'm very like British all the way through. You can mostly tell my accent, but you know, I've lived in my country like most of my life. So like going out of that, yeah, okay, I've traveled to places, and everyone has traveled to places. But when you come back, it's like, oh, okay, well that was fun. Anyway, continue my thing, and then you're like, well, that culture in, like I say, Portugal was different here in the UK. So when it comes to the innovation side of things, it's like, how do we make that so that it is cross-culture, right? It's also cross-language, and it also understands storytelling when you have to create those certain tools to be able to understand that. Because and this goes back to data, which Shida was saying, which was if we don't have the right data, which has all the right cultures in place, right, and understanding of all this and making it accessible for these different languages, right, then you're not going to be able to have that cross storytelling when it comes to innovation like AI, for example. So, last gun, I'll leave that right there. We'll head over to Cedric. Cedric, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to actually kind of, I think, weave the last kind of three together, because I'm really big on storytelling, controlling your narrative. My favorite African proverb is the tale of the hunt. If anybody's familiar with it, the tale of the hunt will always favor the hunters because you don't hear the side of the story from the lions. So I'm really big on people telling their own stories, right? So I think Carlos mentioned the human component of it all, and actually getting this, you know, derivation directly from the source. Key example of that, I personally, and I encourage everybody to do this if you can, I interviewed my grandmother just in audio and captured it in real time, right? Because I don't want somebody else to get a hold of that, right? And kind of ruin that, because my thinking essentially is that you have to be the one to tell your story. Otherwise, somebody else definitely will, and they'll tell it wrong, which is what we've seen time and time again when we talk about history. And thinking about before, one of the previous questions around success, I think where we lose a lot of this, and my background is in chemistry. Sorry, I'm going to go there for a second. When we think about you know, even the balance, right? I think equilibrium. And we think about, you know, a chemical reaction, there's a catalyst that drives this thing, right, to the product. But ultimately, you got to think about, well, how is success defined? Because in most cases, especially in America, let's be honest, I mean, globally, but for sure, right, we're talking about money, right? We're talking about currency. We're talking about, you know, economics and that type of thing. And if we're talking even more so looking now into accessibility and culture, even extending into language, we're talking about reach, which for a lot of people still spells money. So we have to be, I think, cognizant of the intent again behind all of it. Like, why exactly? Because I think in essence, what we end up finding is that if there is this kind of equilibrium setup of morality and success of innovation, what happens is money is kind of in the middle of it. And it ends up, one of the things ends up being a byproduct of the other, right? If I'm and I'm really pushing like, yeah, let's teach kids about STEM and careers, right, and help them grow, and you just so happen to stumble across a boatload of money, you're like, oh, that's great, right? Which goes
That's
into the
true.
growth. But if your emphasis is on the other side and saying, well, how do we grow and get rich? And if we just so happen to help some people, okay, cool, right? Like, but it's still there. So I think at a certain point, truthfully, we have to be honest about this. And we also have to be very mindful of groups that are consistently left out. And I won't even take it to like race or ethnicity. There are two groups of people across the globe that I personally believe and have seen that we don't listen to enough. It's our elders and children. Those voices are not necessarily included. And I'll end by saying personally that because I worked in schools and had a lot of experience and things like that, I wrote an article a while back called "There's World Peace in Pre-K." So I think for a lot of the problems that we see as adults, if we actually paid attention to how 4-year-olds navigate the world in space and time, especially when you're even traveling, I've seen my son in our international travels get along with children that don't speak a lick of English, and he doesn't speak Italian, Spanish, French, nothing, but they're best friends because they vibe off of Paw Patrol. I think that there's something that we can extract from that and learn, and then infuse that into what we're doing in the world of what we call innovation.
Wow, well said. And I think you forgot like the Fortnite and all that sort of stuff on Roblox. Like
He's not there yet. He's not there yet.
Okay. And also, Ella says yes, we need to capture the voice of the elders. And also, Captain Walker says we love our grandmas. Absolutely. Okay, let's go on to the next question now, which is there a responsibility for innovators to design with the needs of global regions in mind? So, this is kind of continuing on from what we're discussing about. So, what are your thoughts?
This is a big one, and I know we're getting close on time as well, too, so I'm happy to be brief on this one. We are all citizens of the world, and I love, Cedric, what you just shared of like there's global world peace in pre-K, and so that.
Sorry to jump in, Mai. I've just been notified. Apparently, like we're literally like out of time, so I'm afraid you're gonna have to be very quick, like less than 30 seconds if possible.
Yeah, I would say yes, because we are global citizens, and do it in the time that makes sense, that doesn't just bankrupt or completely overwhelm your company, because it is a big lift, but it is a necessary lift.
100% Mai, and thank you to everybody. Thank you for the panelists for joining us. Please do follow, connect, and join them on LinkedIn. Connect with them on LinkedIn. Every single person here is amazing, so go and check them out. Mai, Cedric, Ian, Carlos, Sheila, Luskin. So please do follow them, connect with them, and that is it for this panel. And up next, we have a couple of videos for you. It's been an amazing panel. Thank you, panelists, and I'll see you tomorrow, most probably. But for now, we'll show you some more amazing videos. All right, see you later.